And thank you, BWIPO, for joining me. You made it to quarterfinals. I guess that's not a surprise for you guys, but did you have time to reflect on the group stage as a whole?
From tonight? Not so much, I suppose. I guess I had a couple of hours to reflect. In general, I took more time to reflect on our perspective and like what we were doing. We had team talk after the last game, especially. Not really a team talk, but like we were talking about like, how did it feel? What was wrong? What do we think? And ultimately, I think it was a good group stage experience, all things considered. So, pretty good.
Pretty good. Okay. I feel like we've seen a switch with the Fnatic playstyle from the first round robin to the second round robin, in the sense that you were on the same page, it feels, in terms of communication, cleaner plays. Anything you talked about between the first round robin and the second round robin to come in ready yesterday?
Surprisingly, not really.
Okay.
I think it's just the magic of week 2, I guess. Week 2 is just different for Fnatic, I guess. Memes aside, I think it's mostly just people recognize that the way to get out is by playing as a team and really sticking together to make plays. And I think that, yeah, some of that week 2 magic hit us pretty good in the first 2 games. Usually we have to lose a game for it to happen, but this time around we lost the game at the end. So it was a lot more comfortable of an experience, if you will.
It is not the usual week 2 for Fnatic, in the sense that I've been talking with Reckless at the end of the interview, and we've been used to the drama, Fnatic bouncing back in week 2 after having a poor performance usually, but this time we were actually ahead. How do you explain this? Because coming into group stage, we had the feeling that this group C was actually the group of death, and it looks like the outcome was way less predictable than expected. Do you agree on that?
Well, I know someone like LS, for example, predicted TSM to go 0-6, so I guess it was not that unpredictable. With that in mind, I think it was the group of death and the idea of if any of the teams, like the thing about this type of group is TSM goes 0-6, it's not really a group of death. But if TSM goes 1-5 for whatever reason, you're looking at something that's way closer to a group of death, because my idea of a group of death is 3 good teams and 1 team that could play spoiler. Because when you lose the game to that 1 team, which is obviously possible, right? Every team that made it to Worlds is somewhat, or is at least supposed to be able to play a decent game of League of Legends. It is losing that 1 game to that team that throws everyone off and makes the experience a little closer to the group of death.
You also had a different setup, being in China, going through 2 weeks of quarantine before being able to play in a hotel. How did this play for Fnatic, the fact that you were in this introspective experience, I want to say, because you spent quite a time alone? And also, I mean, it's also the first time you have to get ready for the world stage in this difficult situation. So how did this play out for you, BWIPO?
Well, for myself, I mean, it wasn't very difficult. I mentioned this in a bunch of interviews, right? Like, I have this wonderful thing called a girlfriend, right? And I know esports doesn't always, the esports doesn't always shine the brightest light on them, but ultimately, when done right, a relationship is something that you can rely on for emotional support as well as, well, mental support, I guess, in a more broad sense. So obviously, when you're stuck alone in a room, your mental state is most important, right? So having someone that you can just message and be like, hey, how are you doing? You know, someone that cares for you and you really truly believe and share that with that person, that's something that will always help you stay afloat at the very least.
How about you versus the other top laners there? Because you mentioned something that I'm interested in when you go. I mean, we mentioned the 369, the Nogori, all these amazing top laner we have at Worlds. Where do you see yourself among these players? It's hard because you didn't play them, right?
I mean, no, not really. It's not hard at all.
Oof.
I mean, it's always been simple for me. I'm the best player in the world unless I decide not to show up like that on the day. So I know how to make the decisions, and I know how to execute the mechanics to be the best top laner in the world. I've seen it a million times. I've taught myself a million times. The problem is more that it's not that simple. I make it sound very simple because that's the goal, right? You need to be, in my opinion, you need to have the idea of, I need to be the best in the world. Because if you're not, then why are you at Worlds, right? if you're not trying to be the best in the world, then you're probably not going to win anything. So
interestingly enough, when I look at the stats of the team and the damage distribution, you appear to have the biggest damage share among Fnatic players, which is something that we haven't been used to seeing, especially in a meta where you play a lot around self-made. How do you explain that and the importance you gain through Groupstage?
I mean, I guess I was just playing a lot of Volibear, and the champion kind of deals a lot of damage, especially when you build him the way I do. I like taking Conquer or Press and killing people, so I guess I just... I think mostly, I think we were all on the same page in most of the games we played, and every time I was participating in a fight, I could really commit to the fight, and I think that's why my damage share is likely higher than normal. Because we all know I'm a very aggressive player. Hilly's a very aggressive player. Selfmade likes to join the fun. And then you've got Reckless and Nemesis that are like a bit more calculated, controlled players. That's kind of our team in a nutshell. But what it comes down to is when Hilly like gets to go loose, I generally speaking get to follow up on that. So I'm going to be able to join the fights quite often. And fortunately for us, Hilly had some really good games in groups.
Yeah, he's been one of the top supports, honestly, internationally. That's super interesting to see. But I mean, when I talked to Reckless, we mentioned the fact that this meta puts a lot of emphasis on jungler and carry junglers. But I mean, you guys prove that you can play through different strengths. So do you feel like the meta suits you well in the sense that since you understand it already, you are able to play around other strengths here? Or, I mean, yeah, what's your take on the meta as a whole when it comes to Fnatic's playstyle?
I mean, my take on the meta is that carry junglers need to farm a lot. So in this jungle meta where there's a lot of farming, there's obviously also a lot of windows for laners to exploit weaknesses, right? So for example, a perfect example of this occurrence, the farming, is LGD versus Fnatic, where they late invade our red buff, and then Nautilus decides to trade bottom side because we're trading sides, right? This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to kill the enemy bot lane. We're trading sides. Graves runs to the Raptors. Nautilus runs to Hook Leona. He gets murdered. he just dies. Our bot lane doesn't care about Graves trading sides because, well, if he's going to come out of his jungle, out of our jungle, to stop us, to start fighting us, then, you know, maybe we lose some summoners, but our Hecarim will be able to catch up and farm everything. And that's way more valuable for us as a carry jungle, like in a carry jungle meta than for the enemy team. Because carry junglers don't like the repeat gank unless they're back on that side of the map, right? So like they go from bottom to top. Like let's say in this situation, Graves wants to full clear everything, then base, and then look for a gank, and then full clear again, right? That's kind of how you want to look at it. So if that's your understanding of jungle meta, which is, in my opinion, I believe jungle meta works like this. You have a carry jungler, he will be there at the start of his clear or at the end of his clear, and that's the two windows you have to gank, really. With that in mind, you have a lot of time in between.
Yeah.
Right? As a laner, you've got like a minute and a half or like a minute where I can confirm now Graves is no longer here, so it's time for me to take a trade, to set up a trade, to set up a dive, to set up whatever is going on. And it creates a situation where laners on their own can create way more aggressive plays and situations and set things up for themselves. So I think that's why we had such a strong performance in groups, because the majority of the games, I mean, I think our bot lane won 2v2 pretty much every single game. Like they either 2v2 killed or they didn't die 2v2 for the first 5 games, and then the last game there was some problems all across the map, let's be honest. We had a little bit of a struggle in that last game. But my point is because our bot lane was able to find that, and then I had my kill top lane against TSM in the first game, and then those situations being created is so advanced. Like it's such a huge advantage for a jungle meta like this, because if your laners are able to take summoner spells, when your Hecarim or your Graves or your Nidalee decides to show up in that bot lane, all of a sudden, when his clear is finished and they have no summoner spells, well, it's not that hard to get a kill.
And I mean, now thinking about the top lane meta itself, we've seen an evolution. I have stats right now, actually. We started groups with Renekton being top pick, top win rate, and advancing a bit, we've seen a lot more Camille, Volibear, Ornn, who was a lot more available, Shen as well. What's your take on this evolution? Actually, we've seen 19 champs on the top lane, which is the most champs on every role on the Summoner's Rift right now. How do you explain that this role is so diverse, but still we keep on seeing the same champs most of the time?
I think it comes from like, I think it's mostly the fact you have so many answers into different champions, right? Like you say, Camille's back in the meta, and I had an interview where I basically said in draft, I was like, I think, wait, was it Camille? I'm trying to think. I think it was Camille. Yeah, TSM locked in Camille, and I got asked by Mithy, hey, do you want to lock in top lane right now, or shall we wait? I just told him I have like 7 options, so it's up to you. So I could play 7 different champions, of which that 2 I haven't even heard being like 2 of them I guarantee you haven't even showed up at Worlds. Probably more. That it puts it into perspective, right? You have so many answers into different champions, and that's why I think Volibear and Renekton showed up as the meta, and they still are, because the amount of answers you have into those champions are way less. Like it's way harder to draft against those champions because your options are just fewer.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you lock in Camille, like I mentioned, you can play a lot of champions into Camille, and Camille's still a good champion. That's why you do see her. She does her job. She scales super well. Great ultimate, great mobility, great split push, solid team fighting. But you don't know what to expect, right? You're playing against a Jax player, he can play Jax. You're playing against a Singed player, yeah, that's a matchup Singed can show up in. Shen player, Shen can show up in that matchup. And there's a bunch of other matchups that are 5-5, right? You've got Gangplank that can do fine. You've got blah, blah, blah. You can play a million champions. And obviously, Renekton and Volibear, they both do well into her too. So, well, yeah. Point is, why blind anything other than Volibear and Renekton? Well, some players like to carry harder. And that's the idea. And you can get away with it. If Volibear and Renekton don't play incredibly well and you play around them well, you can pretty much pick any top laner in the game, I feel like.
Okay.
It's a surprise, but in this carry jungle meta, if you can dodge those windows, those ganking windows that the enemy junglers have, because if they camp you, they're going to fall behind in camps, and if you fall behind in camps, those champions don't really get to do anything anymore.
Yeah. Interesting. And I feel like, I mean, with best of 5s especially, we're going to see a lot more of these champions because you have to adapt one game after another and focusing on these best of 5s. That's also a talk I had with Reckless, but we know most of the opponents by now that you may face in quarters, which are Suning, Damwon, probably Top Esports. I heard some fan and community discussions around the team that would suit the best for Fnatic's playstyle, but what is your take on that, on the opponents you may face?
I thought about it, and ultimately I think all those teams play very similar. I think they all play a very similar style, and they all have the same traits. They have a strong top laner, a very strong top laner, so you've got 369 from Top Esports, which we can assume, but let's say DRX makes it as the first seed, because I do think those are the only 2 options. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's one of those 2. Strong top side, strong jungler individually, strong mid laner, and strong bot lane. So TLDR, strong team all around.
Yeah.
I just think that Suning and Damwon have from strong top laner, it goes a bit too crazy strong top laner. And what I mean by that is that these guys, like, they really push it. And that makes it really interesting to play against them. So stylistically, obviously, playing against Top Esports might be the best for us, because obviously Jackie loved Reckless, even though World Finals, it wasn't the greatest matchup. Even then, actually, I think that was actually our closest lane pretty much throughout Worlds 2018. So I would say that Top Esports in that idea would be the closest matchup for us. And I think that Nemesis actually does quite well as a player against very strong mid laners, because as a player, he tends to be more neutral, more passive. So neutralizing a player like Knight would be... I would have an easier time trusting Nemesis to neutralize a very strong mid laner than, say, for example, Caps that likes to be a bit more explosive, right? So even though that's a very controversial statement, maybe, but I think as players, Caps would much rather try to fight and contest that guy. And Nemesis is way more okay with just being like, you know what, I'll just take the Orianna and farm it out. No worries, man.
Yeah, and Nemesis is like Crown 2017 against Faker playing Malzahar and trying to neutralize Faker. That's how I see it.
Yeah, great example.
You mentioned
That's
G2.
a great example.
That's my last question, actually. What is your take on Fnatic looking better than G2 after group stage?
Yeah, as a team, I think we look better. Like, I mean, we had some crazy moments where people were like, holy moly, these guys are on fire, you know, like, don't get me wrong. Like, it was great to play as well, right? Like, I remember, there was a moment where, Kramer, I think he was playing Senna, like, he poked a Healy over the wall, and then, like, Healy just eat him over the wall and just dropped the ward for me, and we just murdered him. Like, moments like that, it helps me remember, how nice it is to like really trust someone, right? Like me and Hilly were talking, like I can TP. I was telling him I can TP, I can TP. I just need the ward, right? And I was just screaming at him to drop a ward when he was doing that, and he like instantly dropped the ward as soon as he got over the wall, as deep as he could. Like he literally put it as far as he could. I TP'd in, we got 2 kills, and I was like, that felt really good. And then I was like walking around in the river. Selfmade found another kill. I came to collect it as well, and when you're in a game like that, I think that like the biggest deal there is that everyone was looking at the same thing. Like everyone had their screen on Hilly's screen, if that makes sense. We're all looking at Hilly and we're all ready to make a play together. And I think that that's why we had a better, like it looked better than G2, because as a team, we were all on the same page.
Yeah.
We were committed to every single play we made. Even at the last game, like the Baron contest we did, we were all committed. We died, like we got ace there as a team. And I think that proves our group stage performance as a whole, that past a certain point in the game, Fnatic was playing with 5 players at every single point, and whether we killed 5 players or died as 5 players, doesn't matter, because we were a team.
I agree, and not gonna lie, we've missed this Fnatic, honestly. And okay. One last question. I know that the previous one was supposed to be the last, but is there some nuggets you could give me on what we can expect from Fnatic in quarterfinals?
Oh, that's really hard to say. First of all, I would love to see what opponent we're playing against first before making any. Obviously, I don't want to get too cocky. The only thing I know is that based on all the top laners from the first seeds that I expect, so if we're going to assume Top Esports is going to make it out as the first seed, which we could be surprised, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that. Prove me wrong, DRX. Why not? That said, if we're assuming 369, Nuguri, and Bin are my opponents, I would say that it's going to be a pretty crazy top lane, because I'm much more of the Caps type of player. If I see a good player, I'm going to go fight them, because I think that's way more fun. And that's not to say that I'm not trying to win, you know. I think this is a point of discussion that a lot of people like have a hard time wrapping their heads around, is the idea of like, why would you do something that's fun rather than that's better for winning? And that's not the point. The point is that you're trying to find a way to make what you enjoy work, right? So for me, I'm more inclined to contest someone rather than run away from them. So you could argue, why don't you play Lulu top and just farm against these guys because they're too good? Well, first of all, because that's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
Anyway, that'll be very hard. Well, not even. It's just changing your own playstyle and changing the way you approach the game is something that takes a lot more energy and resources than people understand. Like, I played my whole career contesting people in lane, and if I randomly stop doing that and change my whole champion pool in order to not do that, then I'm going to have a worse performance than if I fully believe that I can just perform better on the day. And I think that that's something that a lot of people need to understand in esports. And this goes to every single esport, right? Not everyone is perfect. Not everyone will perform on their A game on any given day. And when they do and you lose, you need to accept that. That's all right. That can happen. Someone is better than you. Someone will always be better than you. You might not know who it is or when, but the point is, the only thing you can do is try to be that guy. You know, Nuguri and Bin, they're being considered as some of the best top laners in the world. 369, best top laner in the world. But what if some guy called BWIPO showed up and he was better on the day? That's what you're looking for. Yeah. That's what you're trying to achieve when you're trying to compete at Worlds, because this is what matters. Sure, over 200 games, those guys will probably get the best of me way more often than half. But that's not the point. No. We're playing at best 5 games. In 5 games, a lot of things can go wrong. And that is what happens on the day that counts. BWIPO, I agree with you on all of that. And thank you so much for all these insights. It was a pleasure to talk to you. And we'll see you for quarterfinals. Thank you very much.